Hello, everyone. Arun Venugopal of WNYC here. It's my pleasure to introduce the Center for Traditional Music and Dances series, Beat of the Boroughs, NYC Online. This online series features over 50 of New York's leading traditional instrumentalists, dancers, singers, poets, and more. From Mongolia to Haiti, Colombia to the Gambia, among many others, they remind us how the strength of our country lies in its embrace of diversity and immigration. We want to celebrate these remarkable members of the New York community in these challenging times. So please enjoy these 50 programs, share them with your friends, and spread the word. Enjoy the show.
All right. Woo! Hey, Jake.
Hey, Dan.
So I'm here with a violinist and all-around awesome guy, Jake Shulman-Ment, and we're talking for CTMD and the Radiant Others podcast, and I sound like a real radio host right now, don't I?
You
And
look like it too with the microphone and headphones and everything.
yeah, right. Well, in these pandemic times, we just have to. You gotta really put on the show as well. You can't just go to the show, right? You gotta create the show where you are.
This is the show.
That's right. This is the show. Speaking of shows, I was thinking about how your band Midwood in Fürth, Germany, was maybe the last live performance that I saw in person. I think I performed one time after that, but this was in early March. We went to the Fürth Festival, and we had a nice double bill that was Michael Winograd's honorable mention, and we played a set. Michael's clarinet broke like 20 minutes before the set started, but he managed to fix it. We played our set, and we were in Germany, which was probably a terrible idea because coronavirus was everywhere. And then you and your band Midwood, which was you, Richie Barshay on drums, Yoshi Fruchter and Eleanor Vial on flutes and hurdy-gurdy, and Yoshi's playing guitar. He didn't play flutes or hurdy-gurdy. And it was so great because it was like you guys were so rock and roll, and it did kind of feel like the world was. No, it did. Did it feel like the world was ending yet? I don't think quite yet, right?
No, we weren't sure. It felt, to me, well, I can say what it felt like to me. To me, it felt like the world was maybe ending, but maybe not. And I just felt like I had absolutely no idea what was going to happen.
Right, and
But
contrast that with the no idea that we have what about to happen right now. Like, that's a different kind of no idea somehow.
now it's like definitely messed up, but we don't know how long it's going to be this messed up for.
Yeah, right? So it's...
But I remember being on stage just with it was a special concert for me in many ways, but to be there with you all, but also just to be playing a concert on that day in Germany with this very strong feeling of this may be the last time for a very long time that anything like this can happen.
Right.
Or maybe not, but I better make this moment mean something. It was a really sort of it felt extremely important somehow to me to soak up every second of that concert.
I mean, it was a great concert. It was my favorite time I've seen you, and it also happened to be one of my favorite times that the band that I was in performed. It was just
you guys sounded great.
I do think that it was really clear to us, even though we had no idea what happened. I don't know about you, but my flight was almost completely empty, and it was just so weird. But then there's something about us being together as especially what was really great about it was that it was two klezmer bands that are were on the tops of their game, and they were all our cohort. They were all our age generation for the most part, except for old Dave Licht on the drums. But that man is ageless.
He's part of everything.
And this is every generation is beautiful, and I could go on for hours about how important it is to me that I've had experiences playing with people in multi-generational career and all that kind of stuff. But there is something special. It was a sweet cohort, and I just remember it was it was just a really good group of people, and all of us wide-eyed, shaking our heads, washing our hands,
Yeah,
crazy stuff.
there was so much kind of love around
Yeah.
that evening, and it was also my birthday, and
Right.
it was March 6th, and I turned 36. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, so it was a double high birthday for me,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it was I don't know, something about it just felt very significant the whole time, and then I remember calling you guys up at the end, and we just had that big impromptu jam on stage, and
Yeah, that was smart.
oof, it was amazing.
I feel so lucky. I actually can't imagine having gone through the last 3 months without having sort of ended on a high note. And
Yeah.
I just watched, especially in April, in March and April, when I just watched all people, like friends who had worked so hard to build these touring careers and stuff, just have things fall apart. And I just happened to be in a situation where like April was always going to be a pretty dead for me. And
Mm.
so I didn't really lose that much. I mean, at this point, it's a different story. But like at the time, I was like, well, I still feel buoyed by this experience. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, just to like remind everybody how amazing live music is.
Yeah. I unfortunately was this that gig was the start of what was supposed to have been 2 months of back-to-back international touring for me. I was
Ouch!
supposed to
Right.
Yeah, I was supposed to have after that I was supposed to have been in the UK for a bunch of different gigs and rehearsing and then going and recording Josh Waletsky's new project of all new Yiddish songs that I was kind of sort of directing the music for, and then after that a whole Midwood tour on the west in the Pacific Northwest, that I've
Right.
been working on for a year, booking,
That's what it
and
takes.
a festival in Portland that I helped my friend organize, and I was yeah. Anyway,
What a loss, though. You know, it's really important, for us to be able to take time to grieve for this stuff. I think that I know when this all started, I feel like you watch musicians who are so amazingly creative and so resourceful just jump into it like feet first, right into the deep end, trying to figure out what this new world is, trying to figure out how to make money, trying to figure out how to make music and all this stuff. And like, yeah, I respect that like a ton. And in some ways, I wish I was more like that than I am. But I also feel like we just got to be really pissed at some point about all this stuff. I mean,
yeah,
right, you had how people don't understand always how much work it takes to book a tour. Like
yeah,
nowadays, right? A
yeah. I
tour,
mean, there
especially a
was
tour that has some level of financial stability to it.
yeah, that was like the main thing that I spent the months of basically October, November, and December doing.
Yeah, there you go. That
Yeah,
was the main thing and poof. So,
just gone. So,
right.
but look, um, I saw some meme on Facebook the other day that I really loved, and I'll paraphrase it. I don't remember the exact words, but it was something having to do with we are witnessing. It was something like we are witnessing the fallout of the destruction of the bubble. Uh, what is it? It was like we are witnessing we are witnessing withdrawal from the addiction of uh, from a societal addiction to the myth of certainty.
I agree with that. I don't know whether it makes me feel better or worse, but I definitely agree with it.
Yeah, well, I sort of feel like it can be a painful process, but the destruction of myths, not the destruction of myths, but the destruction of an addiction to a myth is not a bad thing.
Amen, amen. So, I definitely want to spend a lot of time. Like, you've been through so much, as a musician doing on violin, and I mean that's your main instrument, but singing, you've done a lot with Yiddish language, and you worked with all these people. But before we kind of, and you've done all this traveling, and before we kind of unravel that, I actually was thinking we could share some Midwood with people because we got a nice video.
Sure.
So was this like Yoshi's space that he kind of brought into the scene where this video was filmed?
This was at the Flatbush Jewish Center that's just around the corner from where we live in Flatbush, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And for a while Yoshi was kind of curating a concert series that was in a really lovely little space.
It's a lovely space. I've been there. Obviously this video is filmed there. So this is we'll check out some Midwood here. Yeah, you can see it. This is from a tune entitled Waltz. We'll watch from here to the end, I think. Love that background. That's so good. Okay, so what I was thinking before up next in the autoplay was Michael Winograd and the honorable mention. That's pretty funny. Google.
Yeah, great.
Good work,
Well, there
Google.
we
For
go.
once, for once, you did a good job. You were going to do a good
Somebody's
job.
listening, right?
That's right. Yeah, right. Somebody's listening. So, okay. So I was thinking about like this is like I I we grew, you really grew up in the klezmer music and the modern klezmer scene. And I arrived
You
at the
did too. Yeah.
beginning of my adulthood. So like my entire adult life for sure, you know. And and but we also and we really grew up with that in a time period where it had these kind of faceted things that touched on all these kind of other musics as sort of like a matter of course rather than a matter of choice almost. At least that's how it felt to me, right? And then
Right.
I was thinking about, when I met you and, you know, I think partially just because you play violin and partially because of your own interests and aesthetic, when we show up at a place like Klez Camp or Klez Canada or Yiddish Summer Weimar, you're teaching stuff that actually is pretty far away in some ways than what we just listened to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Could be. It's like, oh, well, let's focus on the fiddle class, which is going to be quieter, and for example, but obviously, and even way more than that. But I think what gets lost in there sometimes is like, and I know this was true for me, and I think this is true for you, is like, in your early development as a musician, you were in this huge melting pot of New York, downtown, radical Jewish culture, traditional culture, klezmatics, and then everything else that happens in New York music. So
Right.
I was just thinking about like, so if you take that as a starting point, but then also this music is like in some ways where you are now or where you feel like expressing yourself now. I think what would be really fun to do is just kind of like sort of take out the strands and kind of see what's what. But the first question I actually wanted to ask you about this was how you see yourself as an electrified instrument, like electrifying the acoustic violin, and like how you see that maybe in terms of like if there are any violin models of people who do that, because like, and this is just because I've been listening to a bunch of like fusion era and later jazz violin and things like that. Just happened to be listening to it, so I'm just wondering how's that stuff relate to in your head at all, or not?
I mean, yeah, it's an interesting thing. In general, I tend to really not like the sound of electrified violins.
Yeah.
I think pickups, I mean, I have a violin with a pickup that I use to play weddings and whatever, when I need to just be loud and don't want to worry about feedback or anything complicated. So I do it, but it doesn't sound good to me. Um, and I think what I love about playing, well, I love many things about playing the violin, but one of the things that really always drew me, I think, to this instrument and just made me want to keep playing it all the time is the totally endless quality of sound that you can get. I mean, the endless options of sound quality that you can get out of this little box of wood, and and when you electrify it, it just shrinks. It's just how it works. It also expands in other ways, but those sounds are just less interesting to me, I think. But and also there's a kind of raw bite that only naturally vibrating wood can make. So with midwood, I just have a DPA mic that I put. It's just a close mic like thing that I attach to the violin, and it's basically the same as just playing into a microphone. But there's less. It's really focused on the violin, so there's less problems with like mixes and other things bleeding into the mic and feedback and all of that. So, and I don't know. I never really. I don't know. Maybe someday I'll get into like playing with effects pedals or something. I don't know, but I never really felt the need to, because like as we saw in this video, actually there's a lot of different kinds of sounds that happen, and and the other thing about electrifying it is that something I found that was really interesting in Midwood. Well, first of all, playing with Yoshi and Richie are such sensitive musicians who are both so attuned uh, to tone and phrasing, and really interested in making the music breathe in a way that I find really exciting. So I don't know that this trio would work with any guitarist or any drummer.
Gotcha.
But another thing is um, that uh, having no bass helps.
Yeah.
I think if there was a bass, it would instantly be like a kind of heavier, more like rooted, grounded thing that I'd it would there would just be more of a wall of sound that I'd need to cut through with the violin, that I think would would make me play differently. So there's like something about having no bass in the band that allows me to just like wander and breathe and soar in
And
this.
you can kind of do what you already do, but just amplified.
Yeah,
That's
pretty
cool. That's a
much.
great way to approach it. I know that's similar for me. I've never been one of these guys who tried to like create a separate instrument or something out of my instrument. And I have plenty of friends who do it really well, or people or colleagues or people I look up to even, and who I'm kind of envious. But I just, it's kind of like goes back to what you're saying. I think well, especially when you start studying a, or that you make a study or you make a big part of your life, a kind of folk music from a part of a world that takes our, common notions of a Western instrument and starts not just playing them with different rhythms and notes, or maybe even a different like timbral quality, but like really starts to add other kinds of techniques and sounds into there. It's like, well, who needs distortion? Like I know how to make
Yeah,
like like all these, and you probably have all these different models of making a different kind of a crunchy violin sound, even acoustically,
yeah,
right?
yeah. There's all kinds of stuff, and and yeah, bringing up that kind of like what is sort of called ponticello, like that like airy sort of overtony sound
Yeah.
is used all the time in Middle Eastern and Turkish music and Greek music. All of those violin
Right.
traditions.
And from like a totally different perspective or like sense of what it means or what it's used for than sort of like new music or
Yeah,
like modern classical music or something like that. I
yeah.
mean,
It's much more vocal,
yeah.
really based.
But then even the vocal styles have all sorts of noises in them that like,
Yeah, yeah,
okay, so like let's and you talked about like Yoshi and Richie being so attuned to like tone and phrasing and stuff like that. And I think that like that seems to me to connect really strongly to like the way we think about klezmer music now and the way we teach it, and like
yeah.
and the way that we've built our sort of musical lives around those kinds of aesthetics. So like you know where what are some like maybe a couple of like sort of foundational experiences or stories that you got around klezmer, because you got into it like as an early teenager,
Yeah,
earlier?
I went to a workman's circle Yiddish school from the age of 4,
Oh, okay.
every week, and so I was like growing up singing mostly learning songs, Yiddish songs, and then for my bar mitzvah project, I started studying klezmer with Alicia Spiegels.
Like through the worker circle, now called worker circle.
Right, yeah, exactly right. Arbitrary.
Yeah,
So
through the arbitering.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, so I started doing that when I was 12, and really really adored Alicia and idolized her.
yeah.
Her
She's a real rock and roller of a klezmer fiddler.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Um, and
And
then yeah, keep
and
going.
then so that was kind of the start. Yeah, when I was 12, that kind of like, I was around this stuff my whole life, and actually, gotta be honest, didn't like it. I didn't want to go to Shula. Like, my
Yeah,
parents dragged me to it every week.
yeah.
I think part of that was because I I had like a I had kind of a girlfriend in preschool, and and we were extremely close, and we talked about like getting married, but we should probably wait till a little bit older, so maybe like when we're 7 or so, that then we could talk about it. So anyway, she was my best friend, and so at some point, I don't know, maybe we were like 7 or 8, she decided she didn't like boys anymore. So so she wasn't gonna be my friend anymore. And
Sorry.
that, but she was in Shola, so that I think that's why I didn't like it,
Fair enough.
because of that. But so didn't really have anything to do with Yiddish culture, but anyway, but studying this music on the violin, studying with Alicia, kind of getting, I don't know, I really, really fell in love with this style. I fell in love with the the kind of way that it allowed me to connect to a sense of history, not only of my ancestors and my culture in general, but just to to a broader like kind of sense of human history and migration, and the way this music really is a patchwork of so many different cultures viewed through the eyes of a culture that was stateless.
Yeah.
Um, you know, doesn't matter that it's my culture or whatever that may mean. It's cool.
It's cool.
you
I
know?
know. It's pretty clear that you don't only have to be Jewish to be excited by this music.
Yeah, and
We know that.
yeah, exactly. And most Jews aren't excited by this music. So,
Yeah, there you go. Well, I think things are changing. I mean, that's a whole
yeah, I
different
think it
topic.
is. I think it is changing. I think you're right. That's maybe not so fair to say, but
But you got into the music at a time when that was really true, though. I mean, not to get. I
yeah,
actually don't really want to get. I would be more excited to hear about, but that's just something to contemplate. I mean, yeah, I
yeah,
remember how many
yeah. I mean,
times somebody said to me, don't look for any like work in the synagogues or the Jewish community. They're not really interested in this stuff, and
right.
that probably was true. I think that was even true in some
Yeah,
of my experience, but now it's
yeah.
not. It's things are different.
I think it's different now. Now there's no work anywhere. So,
Yes, that's what's different. That's right. That's right.
so but anyway, um, so where I was kind of getting with all that was just that connecting with this music I felt like it helped me connect to so much in myself, um, and connect to a love of music in general. Because before that, I've been playing some folk music. I played for some string contra dances and stuff when I was younger, but mostly just studying classical music, and liked it, but was frustrated in many ways, and was starting to kind of not even really want to do it anymore. I didn't practice too much. And then when I started studying this music, uh, it was kind of like this explosion of like, oh wow, I love this, and this makes me want to study classical music more because wait, I love playing the violin, and I want to play the violin better, and classical music will help me do that. And so I got into it, and it's just like loved it, and it like snowballed into this whole uh, thing that I just can't imagine my life without now.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah.
What was it like, let's say like after college or something, because you really threw yourself into the sort of Brooklyn scene, the New York scene, the klezmer scene. I mean, you had a band in high school, right? That played gigs and stuff.
The Klez Miners.
Yeah. But like
Yeah,
when you were, I remember you were in Ramashka. You were one of these guys who was like running around playing the gig, like working it, right?
yeah, yeah. I had a lot of gigs in like all through college, and living in the East Village and playing these crazy dance parties in older kind of East Village haunts that are not there anymore.
Yeah.
Bushwick parties and stuff, and yeah, and then kind of after that started playing, moved to Europe for a while, was touring a lot in Europe, and um, yeah, so growing up in Klez camp was obviously super important and formative for me. Like you said, like kind of around this community of scholars and musicians and creative artists and theater people. Jenny Romaine was like, she was like mind-blowingly inspiring to work with as a teenager. Like,
Oh, yeah.
just, I mean, like, incredible. And Jennifer Miller, and I remember doing projects even outside of Klez Camp that were like part of the teen program that they did, and we did a thing at Cooper Union, um, commemorating the anniversary of the Labor Bund. And just
Mm.
amazing, yeah, amazing people and experiences, and all that while I also sort of had this sense, and like you said, maybe it's because I play the violin and brass and clarinet players had people like Sid Beckerman, Ray Musiker, Pete Socolo, um, who were a really direct link to the older tradition that was never discontinued, and were really coming at it from like a more American style klezmer
Right.
thing. Leon Schwartz was kind of really the only violinist that was that sort of source in America, and he passed away before I really started playing this music.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so I learned, those Sid Beckerman tunes and stuff at Klez Camp and played all of that stuff, and then quickly realized that this is not really violin music. It kind of could be if we, but in, it's not really. There's like a whole other tradition of this music that really is fiddle music,
Mm. Right.
and that is an older European tradition. So I sort of I started realizing if I want to play this in a way that really makes sense to me and works and is connected to uh, to a long kind of heritage or whatever that kind of, yeah, I don't know if heritage is a great word, but um, yeah, connected to something directly that's older. I needed to go to Europe. I just always felt that way, because this whole Yiddish culture, in a way, is like had its head cut off from its body.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
which isn't to say that it died. Of obviously not, but it is of the understanding of it in America is a uniquely American understanding, and going and living in Eastern Europe uh, really made me aware of many things about the worldview that this culture came
Mm.
about in.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I always think about how I mean, we've both been lucky to play with, the elder types or whatever. And I think about somebody, the music that people who, let's say, now would be like edging in on 100, if not over 100, um, would be, would have played, or like Ray, who's still around and making music on
Yeah.
his own, would have played, like they weren't necessarily the tunes that you or I first learned. Maybe some of
Yeah.
it, but I mean, when I went to Klez Camp, the first thing I did that I remember was, Merlin Shepherd's ear band, and we learned all these tunes from the Kostakowski book that he
Yeah.
was playing, and like that, or you even listen to like Abe Schwartz and some of these tunes, like that was not. They did. Pete Sokolow probably showed up in Klez Camp, and I mean, I'm sure there's some story that he tells or other people tell, or some video of this, and he's like, I don't know what these people are playing. Like, what are they doing? This isn't klezmer music. And it's like, so even the stuff that we think of as klezmer music in America right now is still this kind of like hybrid of, tying the past with the present together, and then like moving all this stuff. And that's super interesting. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so you went to Eastern Europe. I know you spent a lot of time in Hungary. You spent a lot of time in Romania. You're fluent in both of those languages, which is pretty dang impressive. you, um, but yeah, like what was it like exploring? I mean, and you had some help from people who had paved some roads before, right? Like you,
Major help from
yeah,
Bob Cohen, especially. Um,
yeah,
who have you done one of these with him?
no.
Oh, you got. I mean, you got to do
Oh,
that.
we'll do it. We'll do it. Oh, yeah, oh, this, yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
We
But
tried a couple times, but the schedule didn't work out. But yeah,
oh, but it didn't happen. Yeah. No, Bob really. I mean, he is someone who's been spending, since the late '80s. He's been schlepping around Romania looking for old fiddlers to record who remember Jewish music, and he was like, yeah, I met him first in 2005 when I was studying in Budapest, and I would go just hang out with him, spend an entire day listening to him talk. And
well, he can certainly talk for an entire day, but it's always good.
yeah, it's always good. Yeah, and yeah, and just listening to music that he gave me, and he also gave me names of people to go visit in Romania. Um, and it was a really interesting thing that I remember this feeling of sort of wanting to go to Eastern Europe to find out what klezmer music was like there, because I really didn't know. I didn't. I had a recording of the Naya Campelia, but I didn't really. Nobody talked about like what's the klezmer scene like in Hungary or Romania or Ukraine or Russia. Back in the. I mean, even Russia, it was just sort of start. We were just starting to kind of make contact. People like Adrian Cooper and Zalman Latik were like started going over to like St. Petersburg and Moscow, I think in the, I don't know, maybe late 90s or something.
Yeah.
Um, but before that, yeah, like nobody, yeah. Um, so I was really interested in what things were like, and I went over there, and to be honest, I met some other Jewish musicians who were doing klezmer stuff, and I was like totally uninterested in what they. I mean, it was like they were playing sheet music that they found on some website.
Yeah.
Mostly, except for Bob Cohen, who was doing really interesting work. And so I kind of realized, okay, well, came all the way here to study Eastern European klezmer music, and the only interesting thing I found was a guy who grew up in the Bronx. Um, uh,
So typical.
what does that mean? So then I started getting into just the non-Jewish folk music there, dance house, Transylvanian folk music, hanging out with Lautari and Roma players, going to Romania, um, really mostly learning non-Jewish music from non-Jewish musicians, and that was a really fascinating and I think really important thing for me because I absorbed what it meant to be a functional professional musician in a functioning folk culture.
Right.
Um,
And you didn't quite find the Jewish kind of lineage or history connection or direct connection that you were looking for, but you still got to experience what it felt like to sort of study something directly in that way. You know, not
yeah,
intermediated
from
as much as klezmer often has been intermediated by various things.
right, not going to a workshop where you sit down for an hour, 15 minutes, and people show you ornaments, and then you copy them, and they say, "Oh no, that it's not quite that. Do this."
Well,
There's none of
I
that.
think I think that's a great way to do it, and people should sign up for all of our workshops where we teach that.
It is.
I'm
It
kidding.
is. I'm not knocking
No,
it at all.
of course. Of course. No, I'm just making fun. But no,
Yeah,
I know what
I'm
you're
not.
saying. So what was? But it was different than that. It wasn't that.
No, it was sit down. Let's play.
Yeah. And then
Um,
like stuff around
you
that,
know.
even probably like why are you leaving so soon? You
Yeah,
know, or
yeah, and and yeah. I mean, well, there's so many lessons I learned. I mean, about the importance of the bow. You know, people think a lot about ornamentation. Um, Everyone that I learned Romanian or Hungarian, Transylvanian folk music from, nobody really talked so much about what was happening here. Like
interesting.
almost not at all. It was all about the bow arm, which is the breath. It's the sound. It's everything.
Yeah.
You know. Um, so yeah, and it just very interesting things about how people really grow up in this, how they learn it, how they assimilate it without being taught it,
Right.
um, and and also just what the job is, right?
Mm.
Like as a primash, as a lead fiddler, you know, like a lautar um, primash, their job is not to express themselves in particular. Their job's not to create like a beautiful sound that people are then like, oh wow, that's so beautiful. No, no, no. It is to connect to the feet of the dancers if you're playing for dance,
Mm-hmm.
um, to know what tempos people want, to be able to change on a dime if somebody says that's not what I want to do this, right? Because your audience also knows the tradition just as well as you. Maybe they can't play the fiddle, but they know it. You
Oh,
know?
yeah, right. That's a very different experience than what we're used
Yeah,
to.
yeah, and you know, and they'll get angry if you're not doing what they want, right?
Man,
Like,
I almost wish I sometimes I'm like, yeah, that would be, those are that's an amazing experience to have that level of feedback.
yeah, it's very, very precise in many ways, but it's if you play some notes out of tune, nobody cares, right? It's just not about that.
Yeah.
Um,
Excuse me.
so and so connecting to the movement of the dancers and really becoming like a conversation. It means eye contact. It means you have to be there 100% with the whole thing, with the whole
Mm.
community, and or playing for tables, like with people sitting around drinking. They want to sing. Your job is to come come around and connect with people. That's what it's for. So it's like, uh, yeah, it was an amazing thing to see, and I kind of just having grown up in this klezmer community and knowing the klezmer style and having that so in my ears and body, um, some of the music I heard there that was not Jewish sounded exactly the same. Some sounded completely different. You know, so there was like this whole process of assimilating everything I heard making associations to the tradition that I was coming from, and that informed the way I played that tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Um,
I learned a ton about being a klezmer from people who maybe didn't even know anything about klezmer.
right, but it's almost like it reminds me of what I at least think klezmer musicians must have been like in Eastern Europe at some level. It's like, and it was kind of like what I was saying before. It's like you got to fill in some, even though it wasn't through klezmer music or Jewish music necessarily, you were filling in some of the gaps of the type of learning that you had experienced up until that point.
Yeah,
And it's an interesting thing to compare and contrast that. I think it's almost like more than I think I could even handle getting into right now. But just like, what do you gain from the way that we do things typically around here, or that we're able to do things typically around here, with the
yeah,
kinds of authority we put out, with the kinds of mastery that we feel like we can demonstrate or share, with the kinds of repertoire and resources we have, versus that kind of learning, which I'm sure is probably also facing just the same pulls of globalization and all that kind of stuff as anything else. So like somebody, Bob was like, "Oh, well, you can't find." I'm sure, knowing Bob Cohen, he would have said, "Well, you can't find so and so like this anymore. You can't find anything like this anymore." But then you probably have your own
yeah,
experiences that are kind of like that.
yeah, definitely. I mean, most of these old fiddlers who Bob, you know, gave me the names and villages of, who were mostly Roma players who played for Jews before the war, or
I mean, yeah, they're
even,
probably not around.
they're no, they're gone.
Um,
Um,
can we just like remind us and everybody how small these villages can be?
yeah,
I mean, I remember the one time I went visited Romania, and our friend Julie Dawson was in the Peace Corps still out there, and we hiked to this village that really I think was like six houses and a post office.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and I'm assuming some of these experiences that you had were similar.
yeah. And some of them are bigger than that, and others are towns or cities.
Sure.
There's everything.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
And maybe that's
but
just like me being an East Coast city slicker to the max.
yeah,
It's like you can actually probably I'm sure you can have that experience in this country with all sorts of styles of music too.
oh yeah,
Um,
sure.
so we have a video of something that's related to this. Can
Yeah,
can you
well,
just introduce this video to us?
yeah. So this is Nikolai Kovac, who has since passed away, and his brother Viktor Kovac, who is younger and was born after the war. So Viktor learned. You can actually kind of tell that he's sort of following his older brother. I don't. I suspect that if you asked Viktor to play this tune by himself, he wouldn't really be able to.
Mm,
He's kind of following along, but he did learn a bunch of Jewish repertoire from his family, and the Kovac family was one of the main musician families in Maramuresh, which is kind of northern, uh, sort of in the center, a little bit west of Romania, on the border of Ukraine, north of Transylvania, and it's a mountain valley, more
mm-hmm.
or less, that had an enormous Jewish population before the war that was almost entirely taken to Auschwitz.
Mm.
But Elie Wiesel was from Marmorsiget.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't know that. Okay.
yeah, yeah. But so the Kovac family was a family of Roma musicians who played for Romanians, Hungarians, Hutzul, Ukrainians, Jews, Gypsy people. Uh, it's a very multicultural region, and they played different repertoire for each population. And so Nikolai played Jewish weddings before the Holocaust, and and his brother Jon Kovac I also visited. He passed away years ago, maybe like 10 years ago now or so. But also beautiful fiddler. But yeah, Nikolai was a sweet guy. I visited him maybe 5 times or something.
Mm.
So yeah, this is just me accompanying them playing a tune.
And yeah, that's great. So let's check it out. And this is a Jewish tune, right? Specifically, it's listed as a
Yeah,
Jewish tune.
they. That's what they say.
Cool. And I'm assuming Nikolai's the older one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I could rock that hat. I always liked this look.
They're good hats. Yeah. Compass.
But wow, that's so nice. You know, it was funny what you were saying about the pre-mosh and looking around with the eye contact. Like he was totally doing that. I was like, yeah, he's breaking some fourth wall. He's looking right into the camera a bunch of times. So yeah, it's just how he does it.
Mm-hmm. It's part of the job.
There you go. That's lovely.
Because then people will give you money.
Right, and it's not you don't. These things aren't negotiated beforehand. A lot of the time. Yeah, you got to do a good job if you want to get paid.
Right.
Yeah, being a musician's brutal. What can you say? But it's really beautiful at the same time.
It is really beautiful.
Oh my goodness! So are you talking to him in Romanian or Hungarian or what?
Romanian.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was not one for words in particular. He didn't have a lot of stories to tell about things. You know, it was the kind of thing you would ask. You know, he would play something and you would ask him, so what did you play this for? And he would be like, at weddings.
Right.
You know, and you would say, okay, did people dance? Yeah. You know?
That's research right there. That's how it works, right?
Yeah, he was, yeah, and he wouldn't really say anything, and then it was sort of like, how do I ask a question that's not a leading question? And then you kind of try it, and he just says yes because he wants to say yes, and
Yeah, right. That's his job is to make people happy.
Yeah, so I mean, that was just his personality, I think.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure other people were more, were different. So, before we got started, one thing that you said, we were talking about like how you've, and I think of you as somebody of our sort of like East Coast cohort, New York centric cohort of people who are now in their early late 30s.
Late.
Or late 30s. And maybe early 40s, and people like that who from America, like I said, New York area, who have done a lot of traveling, living in abroad, learning the languages. I mean, this is mostly in contrast to just myself. Learning the languages, living abroad, really like spending time and studying with the people from other cultures and learning their cultures and stuff like that. And then, you know, you've been back in New York for years
Yeah.
now, and like, you know, and we started with a rock band, you know, with this sort of like fusion project where, like you said, you're not trying to play any different than you would in an acoustic set, but the setting is so different and everything like that. And you also said to me before we started that, like, you know, it's like funny that you have all this information, you've done all this research, but you're not an ethnomusicologist, and you're not really, you know, we all teach klezmer and teach a lot of music as part of the way that we built our lives. That just seems to be a thing about being in the klezmer scene. But we're not sort of like, I mean, there are people in our scene who are like the scholars, right? But we're not you know, you're not putting out articles and stuff like this. And, you know,
No.
so yeah, like now, like as you said, maybe not right now, but like, let's imagine that you're still playing music with a lot all the time with people, gigs and stuff like that, and forget like the wedding
Olive
gigs and stuff
vine,
to
right? Yeah.
Alva. You know, it'll happen again. But you know, in that sense, like, what do all these experiences sort of add up for to you, sort of as you are today, or in this, you know, this year, in the past year, or something like that?
Mm, that's cool. Um, well, yeah. I mean, what I think I wanted to do this. I wanted to go to these places, meet these people, do this work, partially because I'm interested in exploration,
Hmm.
in a sense of like, I like to go places that not a lot of people would even think to go to. I like that, you know? Um, so I think that's like just part of like maybe a personality thing, or just I'm just into that,
Hmm.
you know. Um, so I think that's part of it, and I just wanted to do that because I found it interesting, and I thought that maybe I could get some interesting life experience and change myself in some way, you know, and it did for sure. I mean, yeah. So, but I didn't do it because I wanted to discover something, you know. I mean, all of these people that I visited, Bob Cohen had already visited for the most part, you know. It's not like I found anything um, that hadn't been found by people before me, you know. Um, I just wanted to sit with those people. And I think that's huge. And talk to them and play with them and be around them. And I think that kind of like uh, it's like we as artists we absorb the circumstances we're in, and that seeps into us like water into soil, you know.
Hmm.
And then I write music, and it comes out sometimes sounding like that. How does that happen? I don't know. It's not conscious, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I made the choice to go there, and that's what's in my ear, and that's what's in my heart, and you know. So it's like, yeah. But um, so I think that's one. That's sort of the main thing. I don't, I, you know. Um, and then also what's in my ear and heart, obviously, is like Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and Nirvana, and um, they might be giants, and
Yeah.
Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan, and you know, it's like Tina Turner, and you know, I mean, uh, Aretha Franklin, and you know, all of these. So and classical music, Bach.
Right.
I spend lately, like the past few months, pretty much all I've done musically is practice Bach solo Bach partitas.
Great.
Pretty much all I've done.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of answers that question.
Yeah.
But you've had some nice jams. I've been seeing people can follow you on Facebook and maybe catch some live streams from your porch or an adjacent
Yeah.
porch. You know.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes that's like a really a breath of some kind of like, uh, oh, it's like I need that
Man,
badly.
that's great. I actually haven't played live music with people in the longest time since I started doing it, probably.
Wow. Yeah, it's we're it's hard.
But you
It's
know
really,
what? Like it's like I don't know. People say things like muscles atrophy quickly or whatever. Or in the trombone world, one of my I got a new student who's like a kid. We're doing it over Zoom, and he's like, my band director said if I take 3 days off, it's gonna be like a week before I'm back there. And I'm like, that's just some like bullying, like
yeah.
it might be true, it might not be true, but definitely what we know is that this kind of like, soaking in, fermenting, musical fermentation process that you described and that we all go through in our own ways, that doesn't go away quickly.
No,
That's not
it
going
never goes
anywhere.
away. No, it will never go away. I mean, you can depart from it and you can bring in other things and focus on other things but yeah, it's just the life we've had doesn't cease to exist once it's the past, It just
Yeah.
doesn't work that way.
Oh, man.
So, um, yeah, uh, I miss Romania so much. I really,
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to go back. But 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 then yeah, and then so like I kind of spent a lot of time in those places, and then I came back, and I was sort of finding with Midwood in particular, I was sort of finding myself in this position of like really being a folk fiddler, and that was all that I did,
Hmm.
and um, and I was, in a unique position to sort of teach people Romanian Jewish music at Kles Canada or Weimar or, Yiddish New York and these places where we go and teach, and was happy to do it. But it also felt like there's a lot of other stuff in me.
Yeah, you had to let that Nirvana out.
Exactly. So I was sort of, yeah, got together with Midwood and said, like, what happens if we just make music? Let's forget about like what kind of music we're making.
Great.
Because
But doing that
when
as a klezmer fiddler, right? Or as a fiddler, not as like a default to some other style of music, right? Like
right,
you didn't change who you were walking into that situation. And to me, I think that that's something that I notice about our cohort in a little bit of ways. And that's something that's really cool.
yeah, I didn't want to because I wanted to do what I do, I was just like,
Yeah, why
I
wouldn't you? That's
play
great.
and it's my voice and it's that's what I do. Um, and it sounds like klezmer because that's yeah, it's like
Great.
deeply part of me. Um, and and then Yoshi and Richie and Eleanor have like
Yeah,
other
yeah.
styles that they all come from and other experiences, and it's all there when we play together. It's really, and it feels great. And um, but yeah, it's not like a conscious decision to keep the klezmer roots. They're not going anywhere. They're there. It's just like that's a
Good.
but they're only there because I've been doing this since I was 12.
Right.
So that's the thing.
You are who you are. Well, this is
Yeah,
awesome, Jake. I think that's like a really great place to sort of wrap things if that works for you.
yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So
Yeah,
thanks for sitting down. I actually really love doing these as videos as much as it's we're separated. But
yeah,
thanks to CTMD for getting us to do this and all that stuff. And hopefully we can all be playing together soon.
Oh man, I hope so. Let's
Yeah.
just, but like let's keep figuring out. I think we still have jobs to do for people as musicians, and um, you know,
Yeah, well
although we
said.
can't play live, like I don't have an answer. I don't exactly know
It's too
how, but
soon.
I feel like people still need us. People will always need music, and it yeah, it's a fundamental human need. So let's figure out how to do it. I don't know. I don't know exactly how,
We're
but
we're we're on our way. Honestly, I think we're one step at a time and we're figuring it out. So that's awesome.
yeah,
All right,
yeah.
Jake, I'm gonna press stop here.
All right, thanks.